everyone, welcome to another video. This is part 8 of my Gateway API for Kubernetes series, and today I want to show you how we can do the routing. This means we have one address, but we can have different options how we route our traffic and also where we route them to. So the plan for today is, first I'm going to give you an introduction of the options we have. Then we're going to deploy 4 demo applications, and we're going to configure all kinds of routing and we test it. As always, if you're interested in the demo or the slides, you can scan the QR code, or you will also find the link in the description down below. A quick recap of what we have done so far is we set up a new AKS cluster. Then we installed the application gateway for a container. This allowed us to create a gateway and also a couple HTTP routes that will configure where our traffic should be forwarded. The gateway gives us a host name. So today I'm going to use the host name provided by the gateway, but in the last couple of videos I pointed my own URL to the host name, and this allowed me to use my own domain as well as configure TLS. Today I want to keep it simple. So what we're going to do is something like this. So we have different routing options. For example, if we have a different path, like in this case, you can see the /bar, but we can also have query parameter. And depending on all of these parameters, we can send it to a different backend. The options we have is, the most simple one is the path. So if we have like /abc, we can route it somewhere else than /123. We can also do it based on a query. We can do it based on a header. This can be useful if you have different front ends. For example, the header sends the user agent, and then you can send a mobile device to a different application than a desktop. Then obviously we can route based on the host name. So if I have my URL abc.com, I will route it somewhere else than my company 123.com. Lastly, we have a default route. So if none of the routes before works or matches the rules, then we can have a default route and everything else is sent to this default route. Now let's switch over to the terminal and we are going to set up everything so you can see how it works. All right, here in the terminal, let's define a couple of variables. So the first ones are the infrastructure namespace where the gateway is deployed and the name of the gateway. Then we have some information about the demo applications I want to deploy. So I'm going to create a new namespace called routing NS. Then I have the routing HTTP route, and I have 4 applications. I just named them 1, 2, 3, 4 to keep it as simple as possible. Lastly, we're going to have our full qualified domain name. That's the one from the host name from the gateway. So if we paste this, it's this not very pretty looking host name. And lastly, I'm going to configure my own URL. So this is going to be routing.programwithwolfgang.com. And this works because this URL points to the host name. So it's just a CNAME record. I have a video how I set it up before. I will link the playlist down below. So if you're interested, you can see how I set this up. Now let's clean the terminal. And before we get started, let's take one quick look at the gateway. So we can do a kubectl get gateway. We provide the name and the namespace. And here you can see what we have configured so far. If we scroll all the way up, we have changed quite a lot. So it's a lot inside this already. So let me see where it starts. So here it starts. So here we have a listener for port 80. Down here we have a couple listeners for, in this case, not this, this hostname, for traffic.programmingwithwolfgang.com on port 443. We use HTTPS, and we also have a reference to the secret where the TLS certificate is stored. If we scroll further down, we have the same for Nginx, and all the way down we also have the same for a wildcard. This wildcard I used in my last video where we deployed pull requests, and we could create a unique URL per pull request, and then we reuse the certificate we have down here to create a HTTPS connection, and therefore we could set up everything dynamically. As you can see, there's nothing configured about routing, nothing we're going to today. So this is also something we have to set up later. For now, let's clean this up and let's get started with our demo applications. So I'm going to create a new namespace and we're going to deploy everything inside this namespace. Now I'm deploying my 4 test applications, and don't be shocked, it's a lot of text, but it's super simple what I paste here. And again, you will have the link in the description below, so if you want to follow the demo, you can just copy paste it from there. So what I'm going to do is I have my deployment. I configure it here with the name. So I think this was routing application 1. Then obviously I deploy it in the namespace we have just created. And down here we can see I'm using the traffic who am I image. So I know exactly what port I'm talking to, and I'm listening on port 80. Further down, we also have a service. It's also as simple as it can be. What's important here is we're using cluster IP because we want to connect through the gateway and not through a public IP address from the load balancer. Then we save this in the variable and we're going to apply this variable. If you're using Linux, then you can either use PowerShell core or you would have to change this to end of file depending on your setup. Now we're going to repeat this 3 more times for the demo application 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to paste this again. And just very quickly we take a look and we can see here, now we use the different variable. In this case, the app name 2. And everything else is the same. We have the deployment and the service. So I'm just going to copy paste this and apply it. So now we have our second application. We're going to repeat this one for the third one. So here you can see we have the app name 3. Then we're going to apply this one. And now we can repeat it one last time with the app number 4. Once this is set up, we can check if everything is deployed. So you can see app number 4. Then we apply this. Now let's wait a couple seconds to give all the pods and the services time to start. Let's clean up the terminal and let's do a kubectl get all in this namespace. Here we can see we have our replica sets, we have our deployments, our services, and up here we have our pods. So all 4 are running, so everything works as expected. Now we can get started with configuring the routing. First, I'm going to configure the path-based routing. So let me copy the configuration and then we take a look at what's happening. So here I'm using an HTTP route. This HTTP route configures how we route our traffic from the gateway to the service. Here we also have the reference to our gateway. This means we provide the name and the namespace. Down here under the rules, we configure how and what we want to route. So if we have a request with the path/routing or with the path/exec, then we route it to the application with the name 1. And this is the reason why I created multiple, so we can route to different ones. What's also important is we have here different types. We have the path prefix and we have exact. This means if I have with the prefix, it's only the first part needs to be /routing. So I can have, for example, /routing/abc, then this route would work. With the exact one, it has, as the name suggests, it has to be exact. So if I have /exact, then it will work. But if I have /exact/abc, then it won't work because it's not exact. To test this, first we have to apply it, obviously, and now we can test it. So you can do a very simple curl with the name of the host name and then /routing. If we go up here a bit, we can see here we have the host name routing 1. This is exactly what we configured here. Then if we do the same, and we just add something like ABC, then we scroll up again. Actually, we can already say it here, routing 1. So this worked as well. The same will work for exact. So here we have routing 1, but now if we do exact/ABC, then we'll see we get an error message because we haven't configured any route for this. In this case, it would be great to have like a catch-all. So if no route works, then we would have this catch-all. And this is something we're going to set up later with the default route. Now first, let's clean this up. And I'm going to show you something else we can do with path routing. And this is, we can use regular expressions like regex. And as you can see, I've let the comments in there because regex can get quite complicated. So I think it's better to have some explanation. But what's happening here is with exactly the same HTTP route. But what we do here is under the path, we have the type regular expression. Under the value, we configure it. So in this case, if we have anything that's followed by regex, so we have, for example, ABC/regex, then this route will work. So let's apply this and then test if what I'm saying is actually true. So we do a curl. This time we do /routing/regex. If we go up, we have here our routing 1. Let's see what happens if we just do a regex. Then it won't work because our regex expression says there has to be something before the regex. I'll leave it there for now with regex. You can do the craziest things, but I'm happy with the simple examples, especially for regex. Now let's continue with the next option, and this is the header routing. So I'm going to paste the route again. Also, what I'm doing is I'm going to extend our HTTP route. So what we have configured before with the path routing is still there, but this routes to application number 1. And now with the second one, I route to application number 2. And with this, we can distinguish where our traffic is going. So if you take a look at the HTTP route, everything on top stayed the same. I still have here my path routing. In this case, I only have the /routing anymore. Additionally, I have down here, this section is new. So in this case, I'm routing based on the header. Then I have to type exact. The name has to be header and the value has to be routing. And additionally, the path has to be prefixed with /routing. If this is true, then I send my request to the application number 2. So let's apply this and then we can test it and see what is happening. What we can do now is we can do again a curl, but this time we also send the header information. I'm not sure if the curl under Windows can do a header request. So I switched over to Ubuntu and there we can send it. So I do a curl to our hostname with the /routing. And as the header, I provide header. And as the value, I provide routing. If I execute this, we should see here somewhere that we are up here. Now we reached the routing number 2. This means our second application and exactly what we have configured before. To test that everything still works as before, let's clean this up and do a curl with just /routing. If we execute this, then we can see we landed at the routing number 1. This means now we have 2 applications, and depending on what information we send, we end up at a different application. Lastly, let's check what happens if we send a different header. In this case, the header with the name header, but the value ABC. If we execute this, then we still end up in the application number 1 because we have a match path, a match for the path. Our routing doesn't care about this header. So this also shows that the routing, especially if you have multiple applications, can get quite complicating. And sometimes you can have results you don't fully expect. So always, if you implement this, try to keep it as simple as possible. and also test what you've implemented. Now to even further extend our routing, let's switch back to my PowerShell. And now we're going to add the query string routing. So I'm going to paste the new HTTP route, and then we're going to take a look at it. So on top, again, the same as before, HTTP route, we have here the path going to application number 1, then the header matching to application number 2, and now we have this one new. Now we have the query matching. That's basically the same as with the header, except we check for the query. Here again, we check that it's exactly the same what we configure here. So the name is going to be query, the value is routing. Additionally, we again have this prefix with /routing, and then we're going to send it to application number 4. So I'm not sure why I said 4, so let's make this number 3. And don't count like Microsoft, so we have 1, 2, 3. Let's save this, and then we can apply it. Should only take a couple seconds. Now it's applied, and now we can test it. So let's clean this up, and we're going to do a curl, and this time we send the query string with query equals routing. That's exactly what we've configured right now. If we scroll up a bit, I'm here. So I'm a bit blind, but here with our hostname, it's routing free. If you want, you can also test everything we have implemented so far, but it will still work that if you only have the path, it goes to application 1. If you have the header, it goes to application 2. And now with the query, it goes to application number 3. Next, I'm going to configure the hostname. This means I can use my own URL to access this routing. So I don't have to use the hostname from the gateway anymore. I can use the URL I've defined before, the routing.programmingwithwolfgang.com. And we also don't have to change anything in the HTTP route. We only have to add or tell it what the hostname is. This works because I've configured the DNS in a video before. This means I have created a CNAME record with my URL pointing to the hostname of the gateway. After I'm done with this demo, I'm going to show you my DNS so you can see how or where I configured it. But if you're interested in the details, take a look at the playlist. There you'll find a video how I set up everything. For now, let's just copy paste the HTTP route again. From top down, again, the same as always. The only change I made now is this host names, and I added the routing URL there. Let's save this in the variable, apply this. And just to check what we configured in the variable before with the routing, I think it was URL. Here we have what I said before, the routing.programmingwolfgang.com. Now we can test this. So you can have just the URL instead of the host name. We call the same route as before. And if you scroll up a bit, we can see here it reached our number 1 application, because this is the one that listens to the /routing path. All right, that's amazing, because now we can access our application with our own domain. We don't have to use this ugly host name anymore. The last step I want to show you is to add a default route. So far in the demos we have seen, it works if you have a route satisfied. But if you enter something, for example, if I do just here an ABC, I'll get an error message because I haven't configured a route for this. So now we're implementing a default route. This is the catch-all. So if none of the routes before were satisfied, then it will forward it to the default route. So let's clean up this window and copy the new HTTP route. So here everything stays exactly the same as in the last example. What's new is down here, this backend refs for the application number 4. Also, what you can see if you compare these two is that the second one is more on the left. Since we're using YAML, we have to do the indentation. And this way you can distinguish it. If you take a look, it's on the same level as here this matches. So if none of the rules match, then it will route to number 4. Let's apply this, and then we can test if everything still works the way we configured it before. Clean this up. We do a curl, this time with /routing. This should go to the application number 1. Here you can see application number 1. Now we do the same, except this time we are using our query parameter. Then we can see we ended up in the routing number 3. And now we're going to call a URL that hasn't been configured. So this is, for example, just the URL without anything else. Before we set the default route, we would have gotten a 404. But now if we execute this, then we can see we ended up in our application number 4. That's the one we have configured in our default route. This is everything I want to show you in the demo. But now let's switch over to the Azure portal and I'll show you quickly the Azure DNS configuration. Here in the Azure portal, in the Azure DNS zone, I've already filtered here for the host name of the gateway. So we can see all the records I have created that are pointing to the host name. If we scroll down here a bit, we find here the routing. As you can see, it's a CNAME. It's valid for, or time to live is 1 hour. That's the default value. And it is pointing to the host name of our gateway. And thanks to this configuration, I'm able to access our application with the URL routing.programwithwolfgang.com. But as I said before, if you're interested in how we can automate this setup, how we can create and update DNS records, take a look at the video from the playlist. There I have a script where I can set up everything automatically. This is everything I wanted to show you for today. As we've seen, we have many different options how we can configure the routing and therefore make sure that our request is forwarded from the gateway to the application or the backend we want to. There are different options like the path, the query parameter, the header. We can have a default route and we can also combine them. Additionally, we can define if we want to have just a prefix or if you want to have an exact route. With this, we are very flexible, but it can also get very complicated. So I recommend to keep it as simple as possible and also properly test your application. Additionally, I would recommend to always have this fallback route or default route, no matter how you want to call it, because if you haven't satisfied the request, you will still have a backend that will take the request. Even if it's only an information page for your clients or customers. So they at least know what's going on and they won't just get a technical error message. Additionally, we have seen that we can just with one line add our own URL to the HTTP route. This will allow us to use our own URL to access our applications. And this was made possible because we configured our DNS and we've created a CNAME record to point to the hostname of the gateway. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments, and I will see you next week with a new video about the Gateway API and Kubernetes.